Hello friends. In today's video we will listen to a story that may make you cry. This is a story about a father who was deeply shocked when he witnessed his wife doing terrible things to his daughter. Be prepared for an emotional journey. Picture this. A wedding day, meant to be a joyous occasion, tarnished by the actions of a daughter who has been harboring lies for years. As we delve into the heart of the narrative, we'll uncover the shocking truths that unfold, revealing the depths of deception and betrayal within the family. Why the hell are you thinking of ditching your daughter's wedding celebration? The angry yell of a young woman can be heard over the phone. I did indeed receive the wedding invitation 3 months ago, but I thought I properly sent back not attending. Yet the woman is fuming, claiming that because I failed at the last minute, the ceremony was ruined and I should take responsibility. Confused, I repeatedly explained that I had told my absence. However, the woman's response was something I did not anticipate at all. My name is Alicia. I have a childhood friend named Mike who lived next door, and our families have been closed since we were kids. Mike, 2 years older than me, moved away for college and after graduating, got a job at a big company in New York. I went to a local college and got a job at a small local company. Soon after, Mike got married to a college classmate and I attended the wedding as a friend of Mike's. 3 years into their marriage, they had a daughter. Their daughter's name is Bella. They sent me pictures and videos and Bella was very cute. Mike has good features though. I thought Bella took after him. Their noses were very similar and Mike seemed to adore Bella to the point of spoiling her. His wife seemed to be a kind person and Mike seemed to be living a happy life. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but 2 years after Bella's birth, Mike surprisingly divorced his wife and came back home with Bella. The reason for the divorce was his wife's infidelity. Apparently, she had been having an affair with her ex-boyfriend for about a year, and Mike could not forgive her. He obtained custody of Bella and returned home. Alicia, it's been a while. I still can't believe my wife was cheating. I went to see Mike after he returned home, but he had lost weight due to the shock of the divorce and was extremely depressed. He couldn't get over it, calling his ex-wife a lowlife for cheating and expressing resentment towards her. Even though he was doing his best as a father, Bella, still only 2 years old, was missing her mother and crying a lot. Worrying about Mike and Bella, my family visited them regularly, provided emotional support to Mike, and helped take care of Bella. Over time, Mike gradually regained his spirits. Around the time Bella started kindergarten, she started calling me Mom. Because I saw Bella frequently and often looked after her, she became very attached to me. People around me said Bella needed a mother, and since I hadn't had a boyfriend in a long time, I decided to marry Mike for Bella's sake. I didn't have romantic feelings for Mike, but our parents were good friends, and with strong persuasion from those around me, I felt more swept up into the marriage. Still, once I decided to get married, I made a strong vow to take care of Mike and Bella with all of my heart. We rented a condo a little away from our parents' homes and started our new life as a family of 3. I had been working hard as a full-time employee at a local company, but I quit my job to dedicate myself to child care, as Mike wished, and became a stay-at-home mom. With support from both families, Bella grew up healthy and vigorous. We had our share of difficulties, but the 3 of us were living happily. However, when Bella was in 5th grade, Mike had to resign from the major company he had been working for. He was forced to take the blame for a problem caused by his boss at the company. Even though he pleaded innocent, his boss's influence was powerful, and it seemed that nobody wanted to help him for fear of getting involved. After quitting his job, Mike, who was an excellent worker, was able to find a new job at a small local business in his hometown right away, but his salary was drastically reduced. When the family's finances tightened and we couldn't afford the rent for our current apartment anymore, we decided to move to a cheaper, older, and smaller one. I begged to return to my previous company and started working desperately to earn Bella's tuition. Our parents offered to help, but they were both living on their pensions and barely scraping by every month. Their house is small, and there's no room for us to live together, so we can only accept their good intentions. I tried my best to manage our family budget frugally so that the 3 of us could live healthily, but Bella, who knew our previous carefree life, could not accept the gap between that and our current reality and began to take it out on me. If only Mom could earn more money, she said, and unbelievably, Mike sided with Bella. I couldn't hold back my anger because if Mike hadn't been fired in the first place, we wouldn't have to live such a hard life, and it led to a big fight. Perhaps because of such a marital life, Mike had an affair. Bella was now in her sophomore year of high school, just old enough to choose which parent to live with, but still needing a guardian. Comparing to his previous job at a large company, Mike's salary had been extremely reduced, but it was still higher than mine. Thinking about Bella's future, I thought it would be best to leave it to Mike. When I consulted with her, Bella herself, returning from school, said she would go with her father. I live with Dad and my new mom. My new mom is unlike you. She is a rich lady. Plus, she started her own company and is popular as the beautiful CEO everyone's talking about. Being with you is just poverty-stricken, and you're a stranger without a blood tie, right? It's okay to live miserably alone in the shabby apartment forever. Isn't it? Bella was already calling Mike's mom. I was speechless at Bella's unbelievable insults and calling me you. Just then, Mike came home with his mistress. True to the name of the beautiful CEO everyone's talking about, the mistress who introduced herself as Kathy was a very beautiful woman. Kathy threw a wad of bills in front of me without even a greeting, a smug smile on her face. Here's the compensation for the affair. It's $80,000 in total for me and Mike if you want it. I'll be generous and give it to you, so pick it up. In my anger, I wanted to throw it back at her, but I took a deep breath and picked up the bills. Then Mike and Bella pointed at me and laughed rudely, saying I was vulgar and poor. Kathy, with a triumphant look on her face, said, "So we've settled. All you need to do is write a divorce paper right away and never show up in front of us again. We've even paid the compensation, so don't bother us with a lawsuit later." With that, the three of them left, laughing at me. I clenched the wad of bills tightly. I wanted to retort, and I felt like slapping all three of them in the face. However, considering it as alimony for two people, $80,000 was higher than the going rate. I realized that I wouldn't be able to win that amount even if I took it to court, so I decided to use the money to start my life anew. And so, 8 years later, I had forgotten about Mike and Bella completely while living a busy life. One day, out of the blue, my parents told me that an invitation to a wedding had arrived at their home. Apparently, it was addressed to me from Bella. When I looked at the actual invitation, the part that said unable to attend had been crossed out, and attending was already circled. My parents said that it had been that way from the beginning, and feeling a bit creeped out, I rewrote unable to attend and mailed it back. I could have ignored it, but I thought it would be a hassle for the venue if the number of guests wasn't settled. 3 months later, during work, a colleague told me that a woman claiming to be my daughter was on the line for me. Could it be Bella? When I picked up the phone, Bella on the other end was so furious that she started yelling at me as soon as I took her on hold. "How could you ditch my wedding, Mom?" I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear due to her loud, angry voice. Even then, Bella continued to yell, "My wedding is ruined because of you. Listen, I don't have a daughter. Can you stop calling me?" "Huh? What are you talking about, Mom? We're family, right?" Forgetting all about what happened 8 years ago, Bella laughed in a high-pitched voice. When I responded with a deep sigh, she started asking for money. "Hey, Mom, your company is doing pretty well right now, isn't it? So you must be making a good salary. I'm struggling financially because my husband is asking for alimony. You'll help me out, right? Because your daughter is in trouble." Like I said, I don't have a daughter. If you're having trouble with money, you should talk to your rich and beautiful mom. When I responded like that, Bella started going on and on about how hard her life is now. It all started with a magazine. Kathy, who married Mike, apparently regularly purchases a famous trade magazine in her industry to see how her company is perceived by the public. Then she's noticed that a company had overtaken hers, which until then had been the talk of the town. It was the company I worked for. After my divorce from Mike, I worked tirelessly to forget about my married life. When the CEO said, "You know what social media is, give it a try," I became the PR person and started being proactive on social media and gaining media exposure. Our company, which had been conducting business honestly in our local area, saw a boost in recognition and sales began to rise. We started to actively hire locals and even started to attract excellent talent from other companies. As a result, sales went up, which attracted more people, and we started to create better products, and we found ourselves in a very good situation. This seemed to be a huge blow to Kathy, and she seemed desperate to surpass our company. However, it wasn't a clever strategy to boost their own sales, but rather by bad-mouthing me to their clients, saying a company that hires such a woman can't be good, as a means to pull us down. The staff were shocked that the competent CEO suddenly became emotional and started to meddle in the management with personal feelings. It seemed that many people who voiced their opinions were either demoted or fired. As a result, talented people started to leave Kathy's company, and it was also suspected and avoided by other companies. Before we knew it, a big gap had opened up between her company and ours. Unable to acknowledge this, Kathy began to lash out at Mike and Bella, and it seemed that Bella and the others did not see any value in Kathy, who was not wealthy. At home, it seemed that they were living a life where angry voices were constantly resounding. Unable to bear such days, Mike and Bella would find people who work at the same company as me and say, "I want to start over with Alicia, but Kathy is getting in the way," apparently crying. But most of the employees of the company are locals, and among the new hires there are also people who got fired from Kathy's company. Naturally, everyone knew about my relationship with Mike, so they were not treated by anyone as a shameless parent and child. Despite this, the two of them who wanted to get close to me again by any means thought if they invited me to Bella's wedding, I would not be able to decline, so they sent an invitation. Even if I returned it as an absence, they would treat me as present and advertise me widely to the guests. However, on the day of the wedding, I was absent. Moreover, because Bella disliked Kathy sitting in my mother's seat, they ended up having a big fight in the wedding venue, despite it being a place for celebration. Eventually, the disgusted guests left and Bella was served with divorce papers from the groom, who saw her true nature. "Mom, come back home soon. Your company is money, right? I'll kick that woman out next time. Let's live together as three again. I'm in trouble if I'm blamed for not going as planned, involving people arbitrarily." Every time Bella called me mom, I, who get a headache, repeatedly say, "We're not parent and child anymore, so stop contacting me," and I hang up. But since they keep calling over and over again, I consulted my boss and registered not only Bella's but also Mike's phone number as a nuisance call to the company. Perhaps they didn't have the leeway to call from a different number. I was able to have peace during working hours. When my work was over and I was on my way home, Bella, Mike, and Kathy were all waiting together. Bella, as always, accusing me of being heartless. Mike repeating his demands to get back together. Kathy was shouting at me to pay her money because I was breaking the promise of settlement by getting involved with Mike and the others. "Hey Bella, if you're struggling with money, wouldn't it be solved if your dad found a new rich mom? And Mike, you're the one who left with the other woman, so if you ask for a reconciliation with your ex-wife, me, it looks like you're a man who was also dumped by your current wife. Is that okay with you?" Both Mike and Bella, who had been so nosy, quietly closed their mouths. Finally, I looked at Kathy and smiled. "I've kept my promise to you. I haven't contacted these folks on my own. It's not me who's bad here. Isn't it these two trying to ditch you and sneakily getting in touch with me?" I quickly turned and headed back to the office. Behind me, the sound of three people hurling insults at each other echoed. With those people in my peripheral vision, I reported to the police that a squabbling family was on the brink of physical altercation. On the way home via a different route, I also contacted my parents' house to inform them that the actions of the three were becoming more intense. It just so happened, Mike's parents were also at home and responded with a reassuring, "If they show their faces, we'll give them a good beating." I asked them, "Please don't hit them. Just keep the doors locked and avoid meeting them before ending the call." When I went to work the next day, many people asked if I was okay. Apparently, after I left, the three really got into a brawl and many police officers had to rush over in their patrol cars. Even with the arrival of the police, the trio remained agitated and didn't care about the attention they were garnering. Eventually, they were each put in a patrol car and reasoned with, but given it was rush hour, many people ended up witnessing the scene. Among them were Kathy's company employees and partners, resulted in several deals being called off. Kathy, a headstrong businesswoman who was so engrossed in her resentment towards me that she neglected her business, ended up bankrupt. Being a wealthy heiress, she seemed to have sought her parents' help, but was apparently told to take responsibility for her actions and left to fend for herself. While Kathy was sorting out her business, Mike quickly took Bella and got divorced. After the divorce, Mike and his family returned to their in-laws where, true to their word, Mike's parents gave them a piece of their mind and severed ties, telling them never to show their faces again. Since the people around our parents' home knew us well, they felt uncomfortable and quickly moved to a different town. He was dismissed after a string of unauthorized absences, having run off without even submitting a resignation notice. Bella seems to be working at her job, but is struggling to repay the wedding costs that were demanded by the groom she had left high and dry. All three of them came to my workplace, but my understanding bosses and colleagues protected me, and my subordinates quickly reported them. The persistent trio eventually gave up when a hefty male security guard was placed at the company's reception, finally bringing the situation under control. Since then, I've been living my life devoted to my work so as not to remember those three. Thanks to the competent personnel from Kathy's company coming for job interviews, our boss is over the moon. I'm making a conscious effort to live each day without letting money get to my head and changing my attitude or abusing others. What are you doing, Bill? Can a man drink that much? Lamented neighbor Mrs. Hargreave. She looked reproachfully at Bill, who was like a son to her. I'm in grief, don't you know, Mrs. Hargreave? Bill whispered, crying and swaying at the table with the drink in his unsteady hand. His red swollen eyes looked distracted and vacant. His cheeks and chin were covered with long stubble, which made him look miserable and untidy. Mrs. Hargreave wrinkled her nose. Yes, you are grieving, but she's grieving too. The woman pointed her hand at the little crying girl huddled in the corner of the sofa, and looking from there frightenedly at her father. She may be 100 times more hurt and scared than you are. She's only 6 years old, and not only has her mother died, but her father has turned into a monster. Mrs. Hargreave stood in the middle of the room, her eyes sparkling angrily. She turned to the little girl and spoke to her. Now her voice sounded very soft and gentle. Come with me, Esther. Daddy will come and get you when he gets a little better. Esther immediately responded to her neighbor's affectionate appeal, ran up to her and wrapped her little arms around her. Her little eyes looked hopefully at the kind elderly woman. And you, Bill, get yourself cleaned up and stop drinking. Esther will stay with me for a while. And remember, you are the most dear person in the world to her now, and you have to think about her first now, and not about how you're hurt and miserable. Mrs. Hargreave took the girl and left. There was an oppressive silence in the house. Bill's hand reached for his glass, but he suppressed that impulse. Mrs. Hargreave is right. It is necessary to live at least for Esther. The man collapsed face down on the sofa and tried to forget himself in an anxious sleep. Before his eyes, as on a film, flew all his family life. Here is his beloved Helen, beautiful and happy in her wedding dress. She happily tells him, you and I are going to live happily ever after. And then suddenly a very recent picture came to mind in which she, pale, exhausted by illness, with a headscarf on her head, was speaking again. But now her voice sounded quiet and sad. You should take care of her, Esther. Don't leave her. Bill shuddered at these memories and cried again, this time of great shame in front of his wife for not coping. A few days later, he, clean-shaven and sober, stood on Mrs. Hargreave's doorstep. Hello, I've come for Esther, he said with excitement. Oh, you have come to your senses. The older woman looked at him sternly over her glasses. Well, come in, but you need to wait. I've put Esther to bed after lunch. She needs daytime sleep now more than ever. So you and I will drink tea meanwhile. I have baked donuts with her. Thank you, Mrs. Hargreave, for shaking me up. They sat at the table and talked quietly, reminiscing while little Esther was sleeping, curled up on the old couch. That's how my son used to sleep, Mrs. Hargreave said, looking at the girl. He was so cute. And then he had an accident at work. It was like I lost my meaning in life. I didn't know why I live, why I work. You are luckier than me, Bill. Look, there's the meaning of your life, sleeping on the couch. Esther woke up exactly 1 hour later. As soon as she opened her eyes, she immediately rushed off the couch and jumped on her father's lap. She happily stroked his shaven cheek, saying, "Daddy, my daddy is back." At this point, I would like, of course, to say that everything had settled down. But that would not be quite true. Sometimes Bill would get depressed again, and he would drink again. And once again, Mrs. Hargreave would take Esther to her place for a couple of days. Time went by. Esther went to school. She studied well, and Mrs. Hargreave was always ready to help if Bill suddenly went out of order for a few days. And then one day, Bill brought a woman home. "Daughter, meet Paula. She's going to live with us, and I hope you'll be friends with her." A beautiful tall woman looked at the girl, slightly squinting her eyes and smiling. She was as bright as a candy wrapper, and Esther smiled at her. Finally, Daddy will be happy. He will stop drinking and crying at night, thought the little girl. And she was right. Her father adored his new wife. But her relationship with Paula did not work out. Everything was fine in front of her father. Paula was usually smiling and talking affectionately to the girl. But when he was away, she literally abused the child. Esther could not understand why her stepmother hated her so much. Not a day went by that Paula did not scold or humiliate her. The girl said nothing to her father. She thought that if Paula left, her father would get sick again, and he would start drinking and crying at night. Noticing that her stepdaughter unrequitedly accepts all the abuse, the woman became brazen and sometimes began to beat Esther for the smallest mischief. Each time, the slaps grew stronger and more painful. "What is this?" asked Bill once, noticing a bruise on the daughter's arm. But Esther only lowered her eyes to the floor, hiding her tears, and said that she had fallen accidentally. She saw her stepmother looking at her triumphantly and haughtily, standing at the window and folding her arms across her chest. After that incident, Paula, remembering how her husband had found bruises on Esther's body, was now smarter and tried to beat her so that no marks were left. The little girl became thin, pale, and cried a lot. But still, she kept hiding the reason from her father. Then Bill decided to ask his wife about everything. "Paula, there's something wrong with Esther. Maybe she's sick," he suggested. "What's wrong with her? She should be punished. She's rude and lazy, doesn't even wash a cup after herself. She just mocks me. I treat her with all my heart, and she looks at me like a wolf." The whole time, Esther looked at her stepmother with her eyes goggling. She had no idea it was possible to lie like that. Esther said her father sternly, "What's going on? Why don't you listen to Paula? What do you want?" But the girl could not say anything. In shock, her eyes instantly filled with tears. "I want to go to my mummy," she finally shouted and ran to her room and stayed there until morning. It probably would have lasted a long time, or rather, as long as Esther's health could stand. But once again, Mrs. Hargreave intervened. She purposely spotted Bill rushing to work. "Hello, Mrs. Hargreave." The man was pleased to see his neighbor. "You've completely stopped coming to see us." "In vain. Both me and Esther are really missing you." "Oh, I tried to stop by the other day to get to know your wife and to talk to Esther, but right then I had to go home." "Why?" wondered Bill. "If I tell you, you wouldn't believe me anyway. You'd better come home early from work. Best when Esther comes home from school. You'll see everything with your own eyes." Bill was on his way to work, and his heart was not in the right place. There was something in his neighbor's words that made him uneasy, prevented him from thinking about anything else but what was going on at his house while he was away. Why has a good, obedient girl become frightened, withdrawn, and worse at school? Paula says Esther is silly, but she isn't. She's always been praised at school, thought the man. A little later that day, Esther had barely come home from school when her stepmother met her at the door with a wet towel in her hand. "Well, come in, you poor thing," she hissed threateningly. "So, you want to go to your mother? Well, I'll give you such an opportunity. She's probably waiting for you there, you ungrateful little wretch." She slapped the girl on the back with a wet towel with a kind of rage. Esther cried, screaming in pain. "Stop it at once." Suddenly heard Bill's voice from the threshold. He decided to take his neighbor's advice after all, and what he saw made his hands shake. "Bill, darling, I didn't do it on purpose. She just drove me crazy. Let's give her to your mother or to an orphanage. It's not my fault." "I don't know why she makes me so angry," shouted Paula. "Are you crazy?" An orphanage. I'll put you in jail. I never thought you were capable of such a thing. Bill rushed to his daughter. Honey, tell me where it hurts. Forgive me, my little one. Esther hugged her father tightly around the neck and cried loudly. All the tears she had not cried for all that time were rolling out of her eyes in a hail of tears. Mrs. Hargreave quietly entered the room and looked with unconcealed contempt and hatred at Paula, who was packing her suitcase. People like you should be imprisoned or isolated from society for life, she said to Esther's stepmother. But the woman only smirked in response. It's not my duty to take care of other women's children. So why did you marry him? You knew he had a daughter, didn't you? Resented the elderly woman. Are you really that silly? I just thought I'd eventually persuade Bill to put the girl in a boarding school. Get out, shouted the man, still continuing to hold the girl close to him. Otherwise, I'm not responsible for myself. Paula, with her head held high, rattling her 2 suitcases, walked away. Bill held Esther in his arms for a long time, saying, Forgive me, my dear, that I didn't see or hear anything. You've been through so much. Remember, you must always tell me if you have something that worries you. I'm your daddy, and I'll do anything to make you happy. You're my joy, you're my life, and I love you more than anything in the world. And I love you very, very much, Daddy. A child psychologist worked with Esther for a long time afterward, and now the girl is fine. Bill did not marry again after this incident. It was enough for him once. He says that his daughter is dearer to him than anyone else in the world. And Mrs. Hargreaves is still helping them in the neighborhood. Thank you for following this story to the end. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section and share this video so everyone can understand the family tragedies that can happen around us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.